Serie A Chronicles is a Media Chronicles production.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Serie A Chronicles podcast. I'm Mina Rzouki, and as always, I'm joined by Nicky Bandini, but we also have a special guest for today. Sometimes he's my footballing soulmate. Sometimes I want to kill him. I'm sure by now most people know. Hello and welcome to Nima.
Hello, Mina.
Nima, of course, is the co-host of the other Italian football podcast, host of StudioInter podcast, and runs the SempreInter.com website.
Thank you, Mina. Thank you, Nicky.
Nima, can you pronounce your surname for me? I always have a struggle saying that.
Yes.
Which I shouldn't.
I know. Tavallaey Roodsari.
One more time.
Tavallaey Roodsari.
I just love, by the way, because I need to say this at the top. Like, I love that Mina has a nemesis, a frenemy, I think you guys are, right? Like, who is called Mina and Nima. Like, the fact that you two have got, like, and one of you's Juventus and one of you's Inter. Yeah. Like, the fact that you two exist in the same sort of, like, universe is just perfect.
My headmistress at school was dyslexic and she used to call me Nima most of the time. So, and then she'd be like, sorry. So I feel like that's happened to me quite a lot, you know? Anyway, Nicky, you've just come back from a wonderful trip to Italy. Are you feeling any holiday blues?
Take me back. Well, it wasn't just holiday, was it? I had some holiday, which everyone heard about on last week's show. And then I went on from there to cover the Milan Napoli game for San Sports, which was fantastic. Really brilliant to be at San Siro for a European quarter-final. God, it's been a minute since we've had one of those in the Champions League. So, yeah, I think, you know, it's funny. I feel like the conversation about the end of San Siro has been going on for so long that I've stopped believing in it. Like, there's been people asking me what I think about San Siro coming down for a decade. And, you know, I will be very sad when it happens, but my sort of expectation that it's going to happen anytime soon, I think I've heard them cry wolf too many times to believe there's a wolf there anymore. But at some point it will. At some point it will happen. And I will say, if anyone hasn't had that experience who's listening and is looking for their, you know, footballing trip to plan, it is always an extraordinary place. And when it is gone, it's going to be a big loss to everyone. So go while you still can, I guess.
Nima, is it your favourite stadium, San Siro, Giuseppe Meazza?
Without a doubt. An evening game with the lights of San Siro, like as the song goes, the famous Italian song talks about the lights of San Siro in the night. It really is not unlike anything else. But having said that, it is a football stadium and it's not fit for purpose anymore. And Wembley was also a classic football ground, but they had to rebuild that because in order to modernize it. And I think a lot of the debate around this has become people are reacting as if someone's asking to turn the Colosseum into a shopping mall. And that's not really what's happening here. It's a football stadium that's not fit for purpose. And the fundamentals of it, the foundation of it is all over 100 years old. And that will, you know, you don't need to be an engineer to understand that engineering has evolved in the last 100 years, and that you need to sometimes kill your darlings a little bit in order to move on to the future. Personally, I don't understand. I think Inter and Milan should have their own stadium each. I understand the idea, the financial incentives behind, you know, creating one stadium together, because at the end of the day, you know, the year has 365 days. Okay, so if you've got 18 games, then with 3 games in the Champions League minimum, that's 21 days of a year that you're open for business. You're in the entertainment business, so I understand why you would share that, because you would halve the costs and you'd still keep your own revenue when you're the home team and so on. So I think that's a smart idea in terms of, cost efficiency. But it has to happen. And I don't understand why the clubs, instead of just banging their heads against the wall with Milan City Mayor Beppe Sala, just don't go somewhere else and do it. And the fact that they don't do it suggests to me that they're not serious about it. I'm sorry. I have zero faith in Jerry Cardinale and Stephen Zhang when they talk about these things.
I was just thinking about that, you know, idea of them having 2 separate stadiums. And the first thing that comes to my head when they talk about 2 separate stadiums is just like, but they have to be as big as this, because actually Italian football has not always filled its stadiums, but Milan, they tend to. Like, even in the lower years, you were getting upwards of 60,000 in there. And lately, that's nearly 75,000 or so. That's pretty consistently full. And I do think romantically, and maybe it doesn't, again, maybe romance shouldn't come into it, because there is business, and Italian football clubs need to do everything they physically can to keep up in terms of business, because they're falling further and further behind. And that's not a new story. That's years old than the rest of Europe. But there is something romantically about having a shared stadium where you get those derby nights where the home end is still there for both teams, right? Like the Curva, Inter will always have the Curva Nord, and Milan always have the Curva Sud, and that relationship.
Yeah,
I don't know. It feels like it's part of what makes those derbies so special. It's like you go there, and even though one team's at home, both teams still have that part of the stadium that's theirs, and it makes it feel extra special to me anyway.
No, me too. I will agree 100%.
Oh, look at the nostalgia, can you? Okay, we're not here to discuss stadiums. We have too much going on in football to discuss whether or not we should be tearing down stadiums. I kind of agree with both of you, so this is why I want to move on. Okay, let's start off with the weekend games. Obviously, a little bit disappointing for, I think, most teams, right? Other than the glory of Roma and Lazio right now. Simon doing a little bit of a fist bump over there. But you were the only one not doing a fist bump in Europe. But anyway, what I am, another side gig. Sorry, guys. But what I was going to say is Inter. Let's start off with that team, because I simply cannot understand how they can do and play so majestically in Europe. Majestically, maybe too much of a superlative to use, but certainly a team that is in control, that can create, that can defend, that plays with intensity and control and heart, and has the ability to suffer, has the ability to create, but also at the same time manage such dismal performances week in and week out in Serie A. Now, here's a thing I read this morning that sort of upsets me, in the sense that they're now looking to potentially pay a bonus to some of the players in order to get them to qualify.
Yeah, they've denied that, haven't they? They've denied that, haven't they? Inter have come out and denied it now since that's not true. But then again, Inter and these clubs and their communication, you don't know what's true anymore, because again, boyhood pride, when people lie repeatedly or bend the truth, then you lose whatever faith in their honesty and their sincerity. So I have no idea, but I just know that it's important to state that Inter have denied that bonus, those discussions. But look, the more I think of this season, I think this has been one of the most pazza Inter seasons that I can remember. It reminds me of 93-94, when Inter almost got relegated but won the UEFA Cup. And the UEFA Cup back then, of course, being what essentially more similar to the Champions League now than the European Cup was, because there was only one team. The champions of Europe were just in one tournament, right? Then back then it was teams 2 to 5 from the top leagues. So Inter that season almost got relegated from the Serie A for the first time in their history, but they end up winning the UEFA Cup with Bergkamp and Jonk, and of course Osvaldo Bagnoli getting sacked, and interim coach coming in, and that was also towards the end of the Pellegrini era, the owner back then, because Moratti bought the club a year later, and I think there's a lot of parallels between that era in Inter's history and now. We've got an owner who is on his way out. It's only a matter of time. Personally, I don't think it'll be done before May 2024, or at least earliest November of this year, 2023. And you're also got a situation with a squad that is incredibly old. I mean, one of the oldest in the Serie A. And we know what happens. We saw it with Ancelotti at Milan. He only won one Serie A. They turn up for the Champions League because that's when they don't need that kind of, they overperform, not overperform, but they kind of get themselves going for the important games. But in the league against Monza, Empoli, or Fiorentina, etc., they just don't seem to be able to deliver from a psychological point of view. But if we go into the actual details of it,
I kind of want to pick up on you saying psychological part of it there, Nima, because I think this weekend was sort of a less coherent performance against Salernitana. Salernitana game, I think, was extraordinary because there was no logic to not scoring more goals than they scored. There just wasn't. This weekend, there was a bit sort of less clear-cut chances. But still, just sort of taking a step backwards, the last 4 Serie A games, Inter have taken 84 shots and scored once. I mean, we can talk about them being not as good as they could be. We can talk about the overall performance not being there. But above all, there's just some sort of psychosis going on about not being able to put the ball in the net.
Yeah. And it's been like this all season. And it was kind of like this last season as well. I mean, that's why they brought in Lukaku, because they obviously didn't feel that Lautaro Martinez was the bomber that they expected him to be last season. He missed a little bit too much. But Romelu Lukaku has been an abject failure since coming. I mean, he's not scored from open play. He's not scored from open play since August. Yes, he's a great. The only thing he's world class at right now is taking penalties. But other than that, nothing. And I think that's the second point I wanted to make as well, Nicky, is exactly that. They create so many chances. It's not just taking shots for sake of taking shots. They're creating a ridiculous amount of top quality chances. But Lautaro, Dzeko, Lukaku, and Correa, whenever he's played, they just simply cannot convert. And that's nothing you can put on the coach. That's just a qualitative problem. It's a psychological problem maybe as well, a mental problem, whatever you want. But when all 4 of your strikers are missing sitters, we're talking missing sitters here. Against Fiorentina, Lukaku missed a sitter. Against Salernitana, he missed a sitter. Against Spezia, they all missed sitters, and Lautaro missed a penalty. I mean, it's just, when you do that, you won't win football games. It's really that simple. And I mean, I look at XG as a tool to describe the quality of chances, and people use different, of course, outlets to see where, people count for XG and every chance differently depending on what the platform is. But I use it as a tool just to see, okay, how high quality chance have they create. And in Inter are pretty much over closer to 3 per game than they are to 1. And that tells you everything you need to know. They are being let down by the strikers. If Mauro Icardi was playing at this Inter, we wouldn't have this problem, because that guy has I don't know how. I mean, at one point, every 0 point, what was it?
You'd have a whole different class of problems. The problems would be, the ultras threatening to come to his house and beat him.
Exactly. You had Wanda Nara as well. And
what about Vlahovic? Do you think Vlahovic would be scoring at this Inter?
Yes, without a doubt, because he's a goal scorer.
Not at Juventus. So overall, 116 shots in 2023, 25 on target in 116 shots, 1 goal, and it was a penalty. Okay. So, I mean, this is diabolical when we look at the losses that they have managed. So we understand that if I'm just somebody who's coming in as a businessman and I've come to see Inter and I'm sort of a management consultant to look at where it is that I can try to build on the side, it's really difficult for me to sort of accuse Inzaghi, not because I think Inzaghi is not I don't think he's a great coach, nor do I think he's the worst coach possible, right? I think the team is creating a lot of chances. I think that they should be scoring a lot more goals. I think they're doing terrifically well in cup competition and almost outperforming a lot of these teams, obviously in Europe, and defeating some of the biggest names right now. Some favorites in Barcelona. Certainly they were built to lose against Benfica. So I think it's kind of exceptional what he's doing. Do they need a psychologist? Potentially. Why is it that the squad is old? And then you sort of know that Ricky Massara and Milan have attended sort of summits and meetings about creating next gen, but there's nothing been from Inter. There's nothing looked at as to how to invest in the squad, right? So we know that there is also a club right now that has this huge, what would you say, a debt with Oak Tree that they have to pay back by next year. We know that they really can't invest in the squad.
Well, the owners do. The owners
so they probably have to sell in order to come back with this. So we have all sorts of problems where you feel like the club can't really take off. But I don't know how many coaches would be doing so well. It's either doing really well in Serie A with the squad that you have, or doing really well perhaps in the Champions League, and they might have chosen the latter. So who's to blame here? Is it the management that just don't have enough money to create a club that's capable of really doing something on all sides? Is it Inzaghi for not having the psychological power to motivate this team, where there are stories now, even if they are just rumors and nothing more than that, about giving bonuses to the side to motivate them? Where is it that I can pin the blame, if I'm honest with you?
I just want to jump in there, Mina, as well, and say, Nima tell me what you think. But like, if this was my team, being blunt about it, I care much more about that Champions League quarterfinal than I do about the league right now. Luca Marchegiani was on Sky Sport, former Italy goalkeeper, at the weekend, and someone sort of saying to him, "Oh, you know, the top four could be more valuable financially than being in the Champions League semi-final." What are we even talking about here? Was his answer. You know, because the mismanagement of a club should mean that you give up your dream in the Champions League. No, pull the other one. They're 2-0 up against Benfica and heading into a very strong chance of playing in a Champions League semi-final. And that is the most important thing in their season right now, as far as I'm concerned. I think you can still have the question which you were just trying to ask about the mismanagement, but I do think, you know, I think it's not an accident, by the way, that 6 of the 8 teams in the Champions League quarterfinals didn't win this week across Europe. That's not just in Italy, that's going across Europe. Everyone's tired. Everyone had a World Cup jammed in the middle of their season. Everyone's having to focus their energies. And if I was, same applies to Milan, same applies to Napoli. If I was any of those clubs right now, and Milan took the most extreme approach because Pioli changed 10 of his starters, all of them except the goalkeeper, I would be going, I don't care for this week. This week, my focus is on the midweek game.
So we're being too harsh then?
No, I don't think we are. I think there's, I don't think we can pin the blame on just one thing. I think it's, look, with Inter, look, of Chinese proverbs, fish rot from a head down. Suning, after the pandemic, have no interest. They basically took out their loan from Oaktree using their collateral, their ownership of Inter as collateral to secure Inter's secure Inter's existence until 2024 May, when the loan expires. The fact that they turned down BC Partners is where the mistake was made. They should have sold the club then. They would have had, but they wanted 1 billion in cash, and now they risk not even getting anything because the club has so many debts. They have a bond that matures, I think, 2027. They've got the club debt is around 300 million, something like that. So basically what you're saying is you want someone to give you 1 billion in cash and then take on another 1 billion in financial debt. No one's going to do that in this in this reality we live in, unless they're insane, you know, and unless they are Elon Musk paying 44 billion for Twitter. Like no other human being would do something that stupid. And that's where we are. So what the problem is that with Suning being where they are, pretty much no longer being interested, completely dismantling their sporting, venture from, they've done that domestically in China, they've done it globally, they don't care. They are not in that business anymore. And I don't want to get into the politics of it, but also with everything happening in the world and China deciding to no longer invest in non-essential businesses and industries, Chinese investment in sports and entertainment out in the West is over. It's dead. It's finished. So that's that. And then you have Stephen Zhang, who evidently is now been given free rein to run this club, and he doesn't know what he's doing. He's completely clueless. And when you don't have someone running a tight ship, and then this kind of goes down throughout the organization. They brought in Simone Inzaghi because he's a company man and he's done the best he can. Of course, he's made so many mistakes as well, as any young coach would do in his first big club role. I, for example, think I hold him still as tactically and as a talent, the next Italian super coach, as I've said for many years. I've thought this for a long time. I think he's brilliant at it. But where I do think he needs to develop, is he's not assertive in his communication to the players. He lacks a kind of ability to get these guys fired up. He speaks, you have to remember, this guy's, the biggest coach he ever had was Sven-Goran Eriksson. And he's a complete mirror of Sven-Goran Eriksson in terms of how he communicates, of how he leads. He's not that kind. He's never going to be Antonio Conte that comes out with a flamethrower and fries everyone to get a reaction out of them. That's just not who he is. He'll never be that guy. He will, he's not the management by fear kind of guy. That's just not who he is. He prepares the games well. He prepares the players well tactically, and he expects them to deliver because they're professionals. The problem is that nowadays football players have to be babied a little bit. And he needs to develop that side of his management career if he's going to have the career that I actually expect him to have, because I think tactically the football he plays, I think he's destined for greatness without a doubt.
Oh, Nicky, would you agree with that? Or is that just a little bit too far reaching?
I think it's really interesting. Like, I think I said on the last podcast, I spent part of my family time with my cousin, who's a big Inter fan, who goes to all games, and I think he really sort of, what Nima's saying echoes a lot of what he feels as a fan about personality being this big thing with Inzaghi, like not feeling like he sort of speaks the right way in press conferences being the thing that and he annoys him. Like he doesn't sort of have that authority that a Conte did, or sort of, it seems to accept things that he sort of considers unacceptable, or even he was saying, that the success is sort of harping on, for instance, we won in Naples. Why don't I get enough credit for that? Sort of suggesting that's not the big club mentality, as it were. I don't know. It's interesting hearing some of that echoed. I don't know. I think he's a really curious one for me. I think he's got his unhelpful obsessions, and for me, Correa is the big unhelpful obsession at Inter. But I also think 100% you can't pin everything that's been difficult there on him, because exactly, Nima's laid it out very well. You've got an ownership who simply are not politically able to invest right now, and therefore you've got a club that's running on
fumes. They're running on fumes.
Fumes, running on sort of past glory almost. Yeah, it's sort of clinging on to what it's got, and that can't sustain forever. So if they were to get to a Champions League semi-final or a final this year, it would be a pretty cool achievement. I doubt it would be the beginning of something going forward.
It's the end. This is the end of the cycle, of the Suning cycle. I think it's evident that with everything that's happened, this is the end. This is it. In the summer, they're going to bring that wage budget down from 134, 137 million gross per year to around 100 million gross per year, because no Italian club can sustain gross wages for the playing squad of 130, 140 million a year. It's just not sustainable.
And I think that can be a good thing. I mean, Napoli and Lazio and Fiorentina are showing us that certainly a lot can be achieved. Maybe you can't really navigate all three competitions, certainly, but I think you can build well if you have the right people in place. Just before I quickly move on, because it's time that we discuss Milan and Napoli, obviously, which is the big game in the Champions League. Just a quick one. You both think that they'll beat Benfica, right? Or they'll get through, right?
I'll go before Nima so he can have the last word on Inter. I think that it would be madness if they don't, but if any club would find a way to do it, it would be Inter. But I expect them to go through. No, I expect them to go through.
I just got to echo what Nicky said. If there's any club that can snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, it is Inter. And the vice versa is true as well. So I shudder to think about what will happen if that happens, because Crisi Inter, I mean, Trapattoni famously said that, after 9-10 years at Juve, or however many years he was there, and he won everything at Juve, he came to Inter and he said it was like entering a centrifuge of pressure. When things are going well at Inter, they go really well. When things go pear-shaped, they go so pear-shaped. So it's one of those two. There's it's Pazza Inter. It is what it is. I do expect Inter to turn up though. And I expect them. I mean, if they were to lose by 3 goals against Benfica,
no, I mean, it's worth noting also that Benfica lost over the weekend against Chavez, who are in 10th place right now. So, and
they are in a bad place as well, Benfica, right now, because they were 10 points clearer in the Portuguese league. Now they're only 4.
And you know what? A lot of people were talking about Otamendi as the sort of defender general missing for that last game, but actually, you could say that he had one of those performances when he did come back against Chavez that he'll be keen to sort of forget at the moment. But I thought their tactics were brilliant. Right, let's move on to Milan, who are having their own problems. Or maybe not, because they're choosing to do that. Actually, this is a very interesting match in the same way that, Napoli also had a game. They finally got to see Osimhen come back. They only had 1 shot on target in their match. But Milan decided, like Nicky just said earlier, to basically really rotate the squad. I mean, it's not just, all that was left was, for Maldini and Pioli to come onto the pitch and be like, we're just taking this so easy against the Bologna side that's been flying. It's interesting, actually, when I do this betting show and they're always so low on Bologna, right? No matter how much Bologna wins, everyone's always like, but it's Bologna. And then all of a sudden, everyone took Bologna to win this match, but Milan should have, in all honesty. When I look over it, I think Milan should have won this, even with the huge rotation. You don't think so?
I actually...
It was really impressive, right?
Really impressive, Mina. I think it's really impressive. Like, they rotated 10 outfield starters. The whole team, like literally the whole team, other than Mike Maignan, was rotated out.
Yes.
And they conceded in the first minute and they still probably should have won the game. They could have had a penalty, I think, at least once.
They should have at least had the Rebic penalty, because like the guy clearly stomps on foot. Like, how that is not a penalty is, I would have been furious if I was a Milan fan. Obviously, then you could look at the handball, whether or not you want to Lukumi's handball or not, whether you want to look at that. But how impressive is that performance? I mean, I know that Orsolini was missing for Bologna, who's been a really major player for them, but is this a case of, Bologna feel like they've done really well, so they probably weren't as energized? They kind of really sat deep in the first half. But is this a sign that Milan could really do this in the Champions League, when even their second string players could really come out with a win in this? No.
Look, I'm with you both. I'm with you both on Milan. I think they should have won. I was very impressed by that performance, and for me, that's again Stefano Pioli. You got to give credit where credit is due. This man just that just shows to me how much this team is behind Pioli, how much they listen and hang on to every word that he says, every instruction he gives. He's literally, I mean, he changes. When things don't work, he makes a few changes. The entire group unites and rallies behind that and applies that on the pitch. That is a coach who enjoys the full confidence of that squad, who is himself also very confident and assertive, the complete opposite of where Inzaghi is right now. And that's why everything works. I thought they were brilliant against Bologna, and I was really, really impressed. And I'm with you both. I think they should have won that game. I was very surprised. I would be lying if I didn't. When I saw that lineup, I went, huh? What is he thinking?
Yeah, we all did.
but when they started playing, and even after conceding that early on, I mean, that to me suggests a team that is mentally strong. If that were Inter, there is no way on earth that they come back from that. They will lose that game 3-0. But Milan, they turn it around and they dominate Bologna side, who are playing really good football and are probably one of the most informed teams in all of Serie A. So no, I was very impressed by Milan.
It's a really fascinating situation with Milan. I almost feel like, well, we're going to need to talk about Napoli as well in a second, but that first game against Napoli, which clearly a bigger priority than this game, they were sort of all at once, I felt like less impressive, much less impressive than they had been, obviously, when they went to Naples, but like less impressive than you sort of felt like they could be. Because at the beginning, they were a bit all over the place. They could have conceded a goal in the first minute against Napoli. They had Fikayo Tomori getting lost upfield there. Everyone seemed a bit all at sea. And then what was impressive was then sort of how they got it together halfway through the game, had a really sort of strong patch to end the first half. Even after Rafael Leao misses that first big chance, they keep at it. And I think that's sort of what Nima's touching on here, like the mental sort of character in this team is really strong. And I think perhaps that this sort of second string just echoes that, in that the team looks deeply imperfect. I mean, Charles de Ketelaere is having one of the worst sort of big signing impacts of anyone I can remember. And I feel sort of just really sorry for him at this point. He's struggling awfully. But there's other players in that team, even at the weekend, you look and thought, you're carrying this player, right? Like Origi didn't suddenly sort of have a great game. There's players even in that group who felt like they were being carried. And it all still just sort of clicked enough. Yeah, I'm finding it really hard to talk about this without casting ahead, because again, it's all about the game on Tuesday. And the big question for me is going to be, given how they had those moments of being all at sea in the first leg, what happens when you put Victor Osimhen into that mix? Because he wasn't there in the first leg, and in 20 minutes, he looks quite sharp for Napoli. But I'm casting ahead here to the Napoli game, and I realise you guys might want to talk more about this game first.
No, I mean, I guess my only thing is that in most squads or most teams that have problems, whether it's Lazio, whether it's Juventus, whether it's Roma, whether it's a lot of things, there's many things to point at. But with Milan, when you look at what can be achieved at this club, what the players have managed to grow into, how they have been nurtured to play this kind of way, if I was their owner, I would put like as much money as I could, because I just imagine what the team can do with this starting 11. Imagine they had squad players that they could bring on that would make a difference as well. They didn't so much depend on the likes of Tonali, and obviously Rafael Leao and Giroud. Like, you just know that there's nothing wrong with this team. It is simply running to perfection. The only thing that's missing is the squad, is a full squad that can really engage and play in all three competitions to its best. And this is what I think is the greatest compliment that I can say, because it is just a simple question of they don't have enough money to invest in the kind of players they need to really make a decent bench, you know? But this is when you know a team is really well, because all you can point to is that. But everything else on a tactical level, they have a surprise up their sleeve nearly all the time. They have brilliant performances from all the team. Everyone is maturing and growing, except, of course, Origi, Charles de Ketelaere, they're having problems. This is still their first season, so I don't want to go too far into that, because de Ketelaere, as an example, started off really well.
I think they have depth in some areas, Mina. Like, I think, like, actually, when you look at the fact that they did change all 10 out-of-pitch players and you still had Kululu and Chiao starting, now both of those have been started at times for them. So I think in defence, there's actually quite a lot.
It's just the forward,
it's just
right?
The top end of the pitch. Like, it's just, you know.
Because Pobega was absolutely brilliant as well. Pobega really needs a shout-out over this weekend's performance. Yes, Nima?
I really rate Pobega as well. I think people, I think as a squad player, I understand why Maldini wanted to keep him. But look, in terms of, I do, for me, Ricky Massara right now, I think is the best sporting director in all of Italy. And I think he's been that for 1 or 2 seasons now.
Really?
But yeah, I think he's done an absolutely fantastic job. But there is no getting away from that. Getting Liverpool's 5th striker was just wrong. It was wrong. Yeah. It was a stupid mistake. It was just, especially when you own a player like Lorenzo Colombo, who I think has been really, really impressive this season in the Serie A. If you're going to use, I mean, the kind of striker that Milan want to play, they want to have the big guy, the big physical, technical guy. Well, Colombo is the archetype of that. He would be the perfect backup to Olivier Giroud when Zlatan Ibrahimovic is obviously not fit to play. Then why not try to rotate him in and have him train with the squad, be part of that Milanello environment, have him go through what Tonali went through a couple of seasons ago until he was ready to take that next step. Instead of bringing a Divock Origi, who this is as good as it's going to get with Origi. He's not a youngster. He's not going to develop in a few years.
Do you think so?
No, I think this is who he is in his career. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I just don't see this kind of room for growth. I mean, with De Ketelaere, I think he's a different animal altogether. Coming from the Belgian league in Club Brugge to the Serie A in Milan, first year, he's a young kid. It's going to take time. I think this year is just like with Tonali and Benasser and all these guys when they came. I'm willing to give them that year to learn and develop and grow. And then next season is when I want to see him deliver the goods, just like Tonali and these other guys did. But with Origi, that's a mistake. I really think that was a mistake. One of few that Massara and Maldini have done, to be honest.
Just to say on De Ketelaere, like, this is conjecture, right? But I'm convinced that we're going to hear at some point that he's just been struggling off the pitch as well. Like, he's a young guy who's moved to Milan. And I think when you see someone playing as poor as he is, who's obviously got talent, like, you know, he's shown it in his career before. I think there's real life impinging on this situation. We just don't know what the detail of it is. Yeah,
it's incredible because no matter how many scouts you speak to or sporting directors, or everyone was looking at De Ketelaere. Everyone thought of him as being a star that's going to break out. So you know that there's something wrong there. That is not him. That there's just something in the environment, or I agree with you, that it's just not working out. But
it's hard at 22 years old to move to a new country. It is. Like, it can be lonely. It can be difficult. It could be language. It could be all sorts of things.
And Milan is not an easy club to do it either. You know, I mean, you know, maybe if you're going to move to perhaps a team that's a little bit more with less pressure, but playing in the Champions League,
Look at Vlahovic. He speaks the language and he's struggling at Juve. I mean, he's pretty much the same age. Like, it is a big step.
Yeah, but he has Allegri. He doesn't have Pioli.
Oh, God. No, but you know what I mean? Like, it's just these things, like, even if you move within the country, even if you speak the language, going to Inter, Milan and Juve is a huge step. When you do it in the Serie A, let alone coming from a smaller, quote unquote, league to the Serie A and then immediately going to a Milan. It's a difficult transition. And I, for one, am willing to write off this season and just basically be, okay, this is one of those, you know, watch and learn seasons. And the next season is when you have to deliver the good.
Yeah, I agree. The thing is that obviously, when we talk about Serie A teams, what we seem to always talk about is the poor strikers that there are. There's just not enough good strikers. I mean, you know, the only thing that's entertaining about Inter strikers right now is that Correa is going to marry Pierluigi Casiraghi's daughter. Juventus's strikers situation is not working as well as it should, obviously, and Milan are perhaps too reliant on Giroud, right? But Napoli are the one team that do have a great striker. And my God, what a difference when he isn't available. I mean, the one thing that everyone was talking about in that little bit of a dismal draw against Hellas Verona was the fact is they got to see Osimhen for a little bit and they felt like they could go home and sleep soundly because they were going to wake up to a Champions League match eventually and then watch their brilliant striker take his place again. He obviously hit the crossbar. This wasn't a very fun game. I thought Verona did pretty well, to be honest with you. But here are the questions that I have for you. Is this just a loss of Osimhen? Is there something going on? Because the ball is it's just not really flowing as quickly and as beautifully as it once did. And is there a case going on where something's just jarred the midfield momentum that they always used to build so well?
I think Osimhen is going to make a big difference. I really do. I think at the beginning of the season, I hammered it a lot as a point. This club has depth. This club has different resources. It can attack you different ways. And I think that was all true then. And right now, kind of none of it matters. You need Osimhen back in there. Look, they rotated as well this weekend. Of all the clubs, they're the ones who could really afford to look at this game and say, we just actually don't care because they drew and they're 14 points clear. It doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter. But I do think it's a bit bothersome when you've been as good as they have to have not scored in 3 out of the last 4 games. And clearly the difference when Osimhen came on and just does that out of nowhere, the half volley onto the crossbar, it's immediately a different animal. It doesn't matter if you play exactly the same game as you would against them. You now have a threat. You now have something that you're scared of that wasn't there before. It doesn't matter if Milan give up the same number of chances they did in the 2 games they played against them already. Some of those might go in now. That's the difference. And that's how football games get decided, right? So it's a huge difference. And I think it's sort of worth pointing out as well. The other difference is this whole scenario that's gone on with the fans, which is such an Italian story. It makes me want to tear my hair out a little bit. But it's one of these stories that fits in the only in Serie A category, I think sometimes. I'm sure that's not true. I'm sure that happens in other places too, but sometimes it feels like this. Aurelio De Laurentiis, who took over the club in 2004, rescued them from bankruptcy, had them up to Serie A in 3 seasons. The last 13 seasons, Napoli have always been in Europe. So that's the longest streak of any Serie A club. Has nevertheless not been popular with some of the ultras for a long time. Part of that is because he is from Rome and not perceived as being attached enough to the environment. Part of that is because he did 6 years ago now, his company Filmara also bought Bari. So there's been accusations of, are you really focused on Napoli? Because you've now owned 2 clubs. Part of it is decisions he's taken down the years that have sort of been ill received by fans. Decisions like having a fan membership card that you need to sign up for before you can buy tickets to games. And more recently, things like security measures at the stadium to restrict instruments and flags and flares coming in. And then also ticket prices of the Champions League. So it's a long story. This sort of butting heads that's gone on between De Laurentiis and the fans. It comes back to individual comments he said at different times. There's layers and layers to it, and it's not unanimous, right? Even among the ultras, you saw when they went on strike for the Milan game last time, there were ultras fighting amongst each other. There's not one united ultra front that speaks for everybody, but this is the bigger picture. Spalletti, after the first leg of the game against Milan, for anyone who missed this, basically said, we need the fans supporting us at the stadium. If the fans won't support us for a Champions League quarter-final, then I'm going to go. I'm not interested. I'm going to leave this bench right here. Kind of call out De Laurentiis and everyone else to fix it. I'm not willing to have my team not supported at home in this game. And what you saw then happened last week was there was this photo taken with De Laurentiis and the ultras basically saying, look, we're all friends now. And there was reports that basically been some concessions made about the ticket buying rules and about things getting allowed in stadiums. So some ground was given. But this was a crazy story because it wasn't just De Laurentiis sort of called up someone and said, right, let's have a conversation. De Laurentiis was put under police protection last week. This was sort of widely reported by the agencies in Italy, by ANSA and others, because they were worried about the threats he was getting from fans. And you had literally the interior minister involved in sort of brokering this peace deal between them. So like I said, this feels like a uniquely Italian story that you sort of have these layers of government getting involved in a dispute between fans and their owner. But the upshot is the fans are back. They were there for this game against Verona. It was noticeably louder. And I expect as a result, you'll get a big atmosphere for the game against Milan. Whether or not that will make a difference, time will tell.
Thank you for that, Nicky.
Sorry, I just felt like that needed to be synopsized for the people to know. And I'm sorry, it was quite long.
No, I think people need to know exactly what happened after that photo came out that said United,
For me, I think it's for the Osimhen thing, just to go back to that a little bit. I think if Osimhen plays that first leg, I think Napoli win. Especially those first 25 minutes when I thought Napoli were dominant.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, I think so. I really think so. I mean, in the first opening 25 for sure. I think what Osimhen provides is it's not just the killer instinct up front. It's his movement. It's his aerial prowess. It's how dangerous he is. He never stops moving. The link up in midfield, how he links up with the midfield, how he's always a passing option, how he always provides the ball playing off of him to a teammate. He really is one of the most complete strikers out there, and he's a good finisher as well, even though I think he can improve in that regard and become more clinical. I think if he's fit and plays and is firing on all cylinders, I think Napoli win that game. I do wonder now, however, in this return leg, him being back, without Anguissa, without Kim Min-jae, I wonder if they can turn it around. I really do, because this is the ideal game for Milan. This is a game where they can defend deep. They can go back to the back three. They can play the 3-4-2-1. And we know that they're very fluid in terms of formation. And they're going to play counter-attacking football. And they've got Rafael Leao, who alone can keep 3-4 defenders completely occupied by himself because of the speed and quality that he has individually. And so I wonder if Napoli turn this around. For me, it's more 65, 60-40 kind of favorite in favor of Milan, to be honest.
Nicky?
Yeah, I agree with everything Nima said about the impact of Osimhen. I think he transforms the team. I think that Milan's defense showed enough holes in that first leg to think that he can create things. It was really interesting right after that game. I spoke to Lobotka, and you could feel his frustration at being asked the predictable questions about you've lost to Milan again, that you haven't scored in either of these games, because he said it, but you could feel he almost wanted to scream it. We played well, we played a good game here today, and they did. Even after they went down to 10 men, they had the best chance of those remaining minutes after they went down to 10 men. They played mostly a good game, and if you play mostly a good game and you've got, in my opinion, one of the best strikers in the world up front, you hope for a different outcome. The issue, as Nima's just said, they're down two really important players. Anguissa was really one of their best performers in that first leg, I felt like, especially the first half. And also, they have to win now. Milan don't have to win. Milan can draw. So your outs are reduced, which is why it's why it's going to be a fascinating game to watch, to be honest.
I mean, we are talking about a team that sort of has outscored most opponents, right? And have got the most goals in the Champions League as well. And I agree that obviously Milan have a strong defense and can do that if they want to. I don't think they'll go with the 3-man back line, because I think it really takes away from their ability to produce anything attacking wise. And it would take too much to change that should Napoli get an equalizer, whether that be a set piece or not, because actually they're the best in Serie A, at least at scoring goals from set pieces as well. But is there any part of you guys that think to yourselves, is it just a case of, they've already won Serie A and they can take it easy and there's squad rotation, and maybe that's explains sort of the lull recently as well? Is it the fact that Victor Osimhen is gone? Or is there something about Napoli recently or something that's come back to them? It is that psychological thing that sometimes haunts them. Is this something that we should be more worried about, in the sense that if you apply the pressure, even with someone like Osimhen involved? Because Arrigo Sacchi, in his column, when it was the 4-0 destruction, and of course that didn't include Osimhen, he said even if he was there, I think Milan would have won this quite convincingly in the way that they did, because it wasn't about a striker, it was about the way that the midfield didn't move.
I think the psychology is fascinating. I think it's fascinating, right? When you play the same opponent 3 times as quickly as these two teams have played each other, you're not just playing a sort of straightforward who's best, who's got the tactics for a game of football. You're playing mind games with each other. You're playing, well, this person did this to me last time. Is it going to happen again? We couldn't score that goal, even though we had those chances at San Siro. Does that start to weigh you down? But equally, that goes on both sides, But Milan have got this sort of feeling of they've played the best team in Italy. Napoli, the best team in Italy. It's not open for discussion. They're way ahead of everyone. And Milan, is there a thought in your head of, okay, but can we really beat the best team in Italy 3 times in 2 weeks? That's a big question. So I think the psychology is fascinating, and we won't have the answer till Tuesday, basically.
But Milan were the best team in Italy last year, and we haven't seen the best of Milan a lot of the time because of the absences. So it's kind of the very best versus the very best. It's just the differences that over the, last year versus this year. So it's so strange because in my head, when I was wondering about who I want Napoli to take on, whether I prefer Milan or Inter, I thought they could defeat Milan, but they couldn't defeat Inter, right? Because of the 1-0 win. Because at the time, there wasn't this 4-0 victory for Milan, okay? It was the Inter had managed to achieve that win. And now I don't know. I mean, the very best of Milan, I think, is quite unrated, you know? That's, I guess, my question.
I mean, if we saw when Napoli beat Milan, in that game, Milan were better in the Serie A, the return for the first fixture. So
Precisely.
it's, you know, they've been on the same level in terms of, and I think that's more got to do with Pioli and his ability to read games, both before and in games, and to adapt and get his team to adapt to the to respond to the opponent. But above all, again, I come back to this. I think this is just a sign when you have a dressing room and a group of players that fully are behind their coach and believe and have faith in it, that everything he does will give a result and have an effect, and they execute his orders to the letter, and it always has that, you know, effect, that they're so united. That's the key here, and I think that is so impressive to see how Pioli, and that's why he continues. Every time Milan have a crisis under him, they rise from the ashes like a, you know, phoenix bird. It's just it's crazy how it happens time and time again, and it's not by chance. I think it's got to do with them being united and believing in him, and also his ability to read games and changing games. I think one of the problems that I have, I mean, I love Spalletti. I think he's one of the most underrated, most disrespected coaches of his generation.
Absolutely.
I think in terms of, he ticks every box for being a fantastic coach. But one of his biggest weaknesses is his inability to change games mid-game. That's a weakness of his. And I think whilst Pioli, that's one of his strengths. But going into this game, I struggle to see. I think I'm looking at this and thinking a draw. That's how I feel. I just don't see how Napoli win by 2 goals. If they win, they'll win by a goal, and then they'll go to penalties and extra time and penalties. But to win by 2 goals minimum without exposing themselves to Milan and Milan not scoring, I'm sorry, I just don't see it.
So then if we have that, then if Milan ends up winning, we'll have a Milan derby. And then potentially what we're looking at is a semi-final between the 2 Milan teams, one of them reaching the final and both of them not being in the top 4 of Serie A, because they would have totally given up on that at that point. Before we get super excited, let's play this game and then we can discuss at a later date. I think let's move on to some of the other sides. Obviously, there was Europa League. Roma lost to Feyenoord 1-0, but you would feel relatively comfortable that they could probably do and change a lot of that, considering their form at the moment. Defensively, they're just a powerhouse, and we hope that Dybala will be available for them in that match. Juventus, of course, they lost to Sassuolo. I was like, who did they play? What was that diabolical game that I watched? 1-0 against Sassuolo.
Can we just mention, Mina, because I feel like we're going to talk about the big clubs. Sassuolo are on a hell of a run. Sassuolo, since like the start of the year, certainly the middle of January, have barely lost. I mean, they lost to Napoli and they lost to Verona. In that run, they've beaten Milan away from home. They've beaten Roma away from home. They've now beaten Juventus at home, and they beat Atalanta as well. Sassuolo are quietly, like, along with Bologna, just kind of soaring up the table. Not that it's going to necessarily get them to finish anywhere, but still, they are. It's not a result out of nowhere, I'd say.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, Bologna and Sassuolo, like you mentioned, and Fiorentina, we have to say, in 2023 have been nothing short of brilliant, you know. Fiorentina, it's a case of their forward line have started to really click and work, and actually they were always going to regress to the mean because they were just underperforming. They were creating tons of chances. You could say they're a poor man's Inter. Tons of chances, no finishing, right?
Yeah.
But here's my question. Are Sassuolo and Bologna profiting of the fact that the likes of Inter and Milan and Juventus and Napoli are playing so many games that they are rotating the squad when it comes to playing them? So are they profiting from that? Or is it a case of like they are actually two really great sides. I mean, one thing we can say about Sassuolo is that for a long time, they didn't have all of, the likes of Berardi and Laurentis and Pinamonti at the best and available together to play. And obviously Berardi wasn't available for this match, but when they have had them and they've got, Maxime Lopez in midfield and everyone firing from all cylinders, they've been magnificent to watch. And maybe the injuries have been a little bit of a problem. Now, one thing I just want to say about this is Lapo Alcan came out and sort of agreed, I mean, much to my dismay, about, the fact that under Max Allegri, this isn't a side that can do anything and that there's no future with this team under Allegri. And at the same time, blamed the players and said, shame. And I'm trying really hard. I know that I'm the presenter today, but I'm trying really hard to just keep it in because I just wanted to massively say to him, so you want to excuse the behavior of management and ownership, including your family, as the way that Juventus has handled themselves, and place it squarely on the shoulders of the coach and the players who have done the best they can when the whole board resigned. Okay? They have had 15 points and now another court case to deal with. They're waiting on an appeal. This is a side that is contesting Europa League. Okay, I know it's not the Champions League, but it's still something. I just feel like at the end of the day, this is a team that's playing next-gen players that introduced the likes of Tommaso Barbieri for this match, that has managed to make Miretti and Fagioli more likely permanent fixtures, especially when we're talking about Fagioli, who's managed to bring out the best in Gatti when we're talking about a defender that came from Frosinone and was a bricklayer in 2018. I know that Vlahovic is not shooting and scoring all these goals, but let's be honest, this team is doing rather well for everything that they're going through. And yes, there isn't an identity, but at the end of the day, they were second if they didn't get the 15-point deduction that was created because of the ownership and their inability to run this club. When you did have a coach that knew how to play the kind of football you wanted, you chose to not support him, and he had to make do with Ronaldo and the terrible players you put the team in. So you had the coach that played the good football, and then you sacked him because you didn't support him. Then you fought for the pragmatic coach, and now there's no future under him. What do you want? What do you want? Support one and go with it. But at the end of the day, I've had enough of these Alcans coming out and discussing things when... I'm sorry, rant over, but I really needed to get that off my chest, guys.
I agree with everything you just said. I've got nothing more to add. I think it's ridiculous to put this to put this on Allegri. He's worked wonders in an incredibly difficult situation. This is one of the biggest crises that Juventus have had in their history. I think people need to understand the level at which they are. They are not just under sporting justice investigations. 2, they're also, or 3 if you count UEFA, they're kind of under criminal investigations as well for potentially market manipulation, of the stock market. That's a very serious crime. So, I think a little bit of reality check at this point would be healthy for everybody involved. And if you add the 15 points on the pitch, they'd be second, wouldn't they?
Other than this weekend.
What are you talking about? What else? Yeah, well, of course. Yeah, but what else do you want them to do with the cards they've been dealt? I genuinely don't get it. Yes, the performance against Sassuolo was not very good. No one's saying that. But at the end of the day, I conti si fanno alla fine, okay? And at the end, reaching on the pitch, if he's going to finish with all the points, without all the nonsense on the side that he did not cause, okay, then he would finish in the top 4, and they might even make it to the European final yet, which is not impossible either, and make it to the Champions League that route. And then UEFA will have to come out and throw them out of the Champions League for things that, again, he did not do. So so for me, it's just the whole thing just becomes bizarre when people go after Allegri like this, honestly.
And this is with 5 next-gen players that he has made sure that investment has proved fruitful, that this is with a team that hasn't really had a Chiesa or a Pogba available nearly all season, certainly with Pogba. This is with with a striker that doesn't score goals. And yes, you could blame him for that or not. Yeah. Or you could, no one's blaming Pioli for Di Catalare. So I do feel like this just gets a little bit crazy sometimes, where sometimes the ownership needs to sit back and say, well, what are we doing wrong here? Other than that, I do think that Maurizio Sarri deserves a lot of love. I wonder if it's 3-0 victory over Spezia. Maybe it's a good thing that they knocked themselves out of the Conference League so that they can concentrate on this.
Absolutely. Like, honestly, I was thinking this, that it's quite obvious that the Serie A teams don't have the depth to compete in Europe and in the league at this point in the season. And in that situation, because I was very critical of Sarri, I think he just threw away Europe. But to be fair, I mean, if you're going to play like this in the Serie A and finish second or third with a team that overperform and play a football that is just unbelievable in terms of attack and also defensively really sound, adapting to what you've got on the pitch, being the ideologue, but also being pragmatic to what you've got, and not barely conceding any goals and playing beautiful, fantastic football. I mean, some of the goals that they've scored this season belong in the Louvre. They're so beautiful. I agree. So it's just, so for me, you can't say anything to Sarri. You can't say other than just chapeau, applaud him and say, well done. What a fantastic season he's had.
Although, to be honest, Roma's been doing really well despite also contesting the Europa League, recently.
And Fiorentina with the Conference League, weirdly, but I said this before, I think both things can be true, right? I think both things can be true. It can be true that for Lazio, it was one competition too many and they were better off out of it. And it can be true that I think really strongly in Fiorentina's case, actually the Conference League has helped them build momentum because they got some wins that probably were easier than games they were going to win in Serie A. And that let them build a little bit of a head of steam and let them start getting that winning feeling going. And then once they got it, they haven't let go of it. So I think both those things can be true.
Yeah. Atletico Madrid often used to say that Europe would help them win in the league because it gave them the confidence required. For Lazio, it's obviously worth mentioning that it's important to mention that Immobile got into a crash. He was in his car in his SUV with his family, crashed into a tram. This is a matter that's being investigated at the moment to see exactly what happened and how it happened. Anyway, there is an investigation and we hope that everyone stays safe and comes out of this well. Fiorentina are a team that deserve a lot of love that we haven't given enough of. But because we are running low on time, we won't be discussing it this week. We'll go into it next week. Nima, where can our listeners find you and listen to more of you?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the invite, both of you. I really appreciate it. Always enjoy talking with you both. And yeah, if you guys want to check us out, the Italian Football Podcast, we're on Spotify and Google and all that stuff. And the Monday episode is free for all. And if you want everything, patreon.com/TIFB, just like you guys. That's where it is. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, @Nima Tav, ROOD. That's it.
That was fun with Nima. He said one thing that nothing has put Elon Musk's Twitter purchase into perspective quite as vividly as Nima pointing out you could buy Inter 44 times for the cost of Twitter. You could buy Inter 44 times. That's crazy. Doesn't that just put into perspective how bonkers 44 billion for Twitter is? You can buy one of the biggest football clubs in Europe 44 times. It's mad.
So it was wonderful to have a guest. Nicky, it's just you and I now. Just wanted to say I missed your energy in the UK, even though you live so far away from me. But let's do some Chronicles Tifosi shout-outs to new members and to say welcome to them. Usually we do love some of the names that are just first names rather than, a full name. But now we're getting into initials at this point.
I do wonder sometimes if people just get creative because they know we like to have fun. Because there's a couple in this one that I'm interested in on this list. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I'm just saying if someone comes in with a symbol, then you're my hero.
Yeah, star symbol.
Imagine dollar signs.
Yes.
Yeah. The artist formerly known as Prince. Right. So let's split the list as usual. Hello and welcome to HC. I'm just thinking, I just think that it's Hernan Crespo, personally speaking.
Oh, could be, yeah.
Welcome to HC. Welcome to Ed, just Ed. I used to have an ex-boyfriend called Ed. I'm wondering this is a low-key move to get back together. I'm joking.
Wow, yeah.
Welcome to Nicholas Thompson and to Alex Kakafikas. I hope I said that right.
And thank you.
Oh my God, I love this next name.
Well, thank you to Jordan. Just Jordan, could be the whole country, I don't know. But then the best in this list, I think this might not be your real name, but They have signed up as Hit M High, which I suppose is better than Hit M Low. I don't know. Mina.
I just knew your ad-lib was amusing, which I suppose is better than it.
I'm just saying, between the two. Also, Chris Bentley-Smith and Imani Afzal, thank you all so much for supporting the show and for being Chronicles Tifosi. Amazing how much support we get, and we really appreciate it because, as you can tell, we have fun making these shows. So it's awesome that you guys enjoy listening along with us. You can find us on Twitter as ever at Mina Rzouki, at Nicky Bandini. You can subscribe to Serie A Chronicles on YouTube if you want some clips and shorts videos of the show. We will be back again next week. And in the meantime, of course, with the Champions League and the Europa League and the Europa Conference League, but we'll definitely be sending you some voice notes as well during the week. So I guess you'll hear from us again then. Bye.
Do you think there's going to be more anti-Juve rhetoric, just so I can prevent my little...
It's not anti-Juve rhetoric. It's facts. I'm just stating facts. Facts, empirical facts.
Statute of limitations.
It's like, I've got this thing. Well, exactly. Statute of limitations. They're a funny thing. They go in both ways, don't they?
Oh, Nima.
They've been used in many times. They've been used quite a bit by a lot of people in Italian football. So I just tend to like to contextualize a little bit.
I feel like you kind of like Juve, or you stick up for them a lot. I mean, you're very...
No, look, what I don't like, I like you. I think you have to respect, you can't say that you like Italian football and not respect Juventus, what they've done and the players they've had and the history they've had, right? I just don't have any respect for that family that runs and owns that club. I just don't. I think they are the way that they carry themselves and how they run that club, like, is so unnecessary. The way that the things that they do, Juventus do not need the quality that is there on the pitch through the years. Did not need all this nonsense and sideshow. And I think they need to assume their responsibility as being one of the big teams in Italian football, and not put Italian football in these situations repeatedly every 20 years. That's my problem with them. It's with the Agnelli clan, the Elkan clan. It's not with Juventus as a club. I separate Juve and those two things and that ownership group. They're two separate things for me.